Welcome to Shinsen Sports, where the talk is fresh and so are the hosts. And I'm Fred.
And I'm also Fred, but I'm Fred the Third. So, in life, to avoid any confusion between us, I went by Trey, right? So my name's Trey. And, you want to give us a little bit of history behind...
Well, not so much history.
Meaning
to
Shinsen.
The meaning of Shinsen is fresh in Japanese. So Fresh Sports is the talk of the name of the show.
Right.
And so let's get right into it.
What
do you want to talk about?
What I want to talk about today is, on the way here, I was walking through the train station and I saw a woman wearing a Fortnite hoodie. And, when it comes to sports history, who is known infamously for wearing something Fortnite related to a big sports event?
I don't know who.
Knicks bust Kevin Knox wore a Fortnite suit to the NBA draft, which is our first topic of the day, the NBA draft. And let's start with the main guys, right? You have Vic, Brandon Miller, and Scoot Henderson. So the main guy, Vic.
Those are the only three that I really knew anything about.
Right.
A lot of the NCAA college players, a lot of the high school players that may have been drafted in the first round this year, I wasn't really all that familiar with. From what I understand, it wasn't a very deep draft this year. Maybe only the top 5 or so is probably going to amount to anything. But then again, you're always surprised by somebody that nobody expected panning out. But to me, it seemed like the draft went pretty much as the experts had predicted. From what I understand, I think there are 30 picks in the first round.
Yep.
They may not have selected the actual correct order, correct team that picked, but the experts picked correctly 25 of the 30 that were drafted. I'm not 100% certain as to how they'll all pan out. I don't think anybody does. But what I thought was very interesting about the first round of the draft was pick number 3. There was a lot of speculation as to what Portland was going to do with number 3. They ended up drafting Scoot and keeping the pick. There's all this speculation about what Portland may do with Damian Lillard, their top player, who's now 33 years old.
Yeah, he's older than I thought, personally.
Yeah, and so his getting older, his window of opportunity is probably beginning to close, or it will start closing shortly. Is he really going to stick with the team, or is he going to seek greener pastures, go someplace else? That was, to me, the most interesting part of the draft, and for some reason, nothing happened.
Yeah.
What do you think nothing happened?
I mean, here's the thing with the Blazers right now is you have had Damian Lillard, who's this talent for forever, and you've never really done anything with it. He obviously has his iconic win versus the Thunder a few years ago, where he hit that game winner. But they haven't done anything. So right now, you look at the Blazers and you see what they have. They have Anthony Simons, who's shown to be a very promising scorer. You have Shadon Sharp, who didn't really have the best rookie season, but he's still an athletic player. He's tall, he's 6'6", he's a good height for the NBA. And you have now Scoot, who's supposed to be this, great point guard compared to all the greats. His ceiling was compared to De'Aaron Fox, who's had a breakout year this past season. So if I'm the Blazers right now, I feel like it's time to part ways with Damian Lillard. We haven't done anything for however long he's been here, and it's time to make a difference. It's time to go young, which we've seen even the Sixers have success with that. They had, not really, but they had Ben Simmons, who was an All-Star a couple times, who was an early pick in the draft for them when they went young, and Joel Embiid, this year's MVP.
Right, but just goes to show you, the Sixers is a great example. Everybody talks about how you should build the team through the draft,
right,
which is exactly what the Sixers tried to do. They even tanked a couple of seasons in order to get the highest picks possible for, what was it, like a 3 or 4 year period
right,
in their history. And when you look back at it now, I mean,
only
Embiid,
one.
yeah. Embiid is the only one that panned out, right? Ben Simmons, eventually, lost his mind. Markelle Fultz never became the player that they ever expected him to be.
Good role player now, though.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think Portland's in a tough spot.
Yeah.
It's you have Damian Lillard, who is a known commodity. You know what you're going to get from him. He is an all-star. He is one of the top players in the NBA. But do you cash in now and build around the three young guys? To me, picking Scoot too was a little bit redundant. To me, Simons and Sharp were sort of similar players. They're all guards, I think. So I don't know. But if you're gonna, they have to decide. They have to decide now. And
you can't
I think
have both.
you can't have both. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Portland does.
Right. So that's it for Scoop. But now let's talk about the one that everybody's been talking about, Victor Wembanyama, 7'5" draft prospect. He could put the ball on the floor. He could shoot. He's got everything on paper that you think you might want. But what do you think his career is actually going to turn out to be like?
Well, if he was a player that I think got drafted before we ever saw Kevin Durant, let's say he came before Kevin Durant. I mean, I remember when Kevin Durant was getting drafted, there was all this speculation about how, his build is a little bit too frail. He's not built for the NBA. But Kevin Durant has proven everybody wrong. He is not too frail. He's actually, an absolute matchup nightmare. His size, his ability to put the ball on the floor, his ability to shoot over everybody,
right?
Which makes him very, very unique. So I'm not as concerned about Victor's build. Eventually, I mean, he's still just a teenager.
Right.
He's eventually going to fill out a little bit more. So I think he's just a taller version of Kevin Durant with even a better handle.
And better defense, in my opinion, too. Yeah, when I look at Vic Wembanyama, I'm like, remember Taco Fall?
Yeah.
Like, he's like 7'7". He's like one of the tallest players to ever be selected in the NBA draft, but he never turned into anything because he had no skill when it came to basketball. He was just a big guy.
Yeah, he had no coordination.
He had no coordination or anything, and now he was in the G League. I don't know if he's still in the G League for the Celtics development team, but at least as you like to say, Vic has a clue as to what he's doing with basketball.
High IQ.
He's a high IQ player, and I think he's in the right situation under Greg Popovich on the Spurs.
San Antonio. I mean, like, how does San Antonio win three drafts and
I don't
end
know.
up with?
And they're not even like
Duncan,
a crazy
David
market
Robinson.
like that either, in my opinion. But I think he's in a good situation under the right coaching.
Yep, I agree.
The biggest concern I have for him is just to stay healthy. These tall players never stay healthy.
Right.
You don't want them to get injured. Like, Yao Ming was a player like that, 7'7" or 7'6", whatever he was, and.
Yeah. But I mean, he's a completely different body type too. He weighed over 300 pounds. He was a more lumbering, less athletic. So it took a toll. His size took a toll on his knees and his feet. I mean, it was same for Shaquille O'Neal. Although Shaquille O'Neal, was very athletic.
Yeah.
But I think human knees and feet are really not designed to support the size of some of these NBA basketball players, and certainly, at the size that Shaq was, to be able to jump and move the way he did, I think that took a toll on his legs, his knees and feet as well.
But it's very exciting to see somebody like this come along in the draft, especially with all the recent overseas, European, whatever it may be, talent that comes into the NBA. And, you could only just hope he has the best career possible. But on to the second pick, briefly, I feel like Brandon Miller.
Yeah, I don't know all that much about Brandon Miller.
Miller.
This was Michael Jordan's last pick, right?
As the Hornets owner.
Yep. So what could you tell us about Brandon
What
Miller?
I could say about Brandon Miller is he's, from what I saw in the draft, from these top 3 players that we're going to focus on, is he was the best fit. I feel like he's a safe choice. I feel like a lot of wings, 6'9", two-way wings like Brandon Miller have a long career in the NBA, whether you're an all-star or whether you're like a Jay Crowder type player, PJ Tucker type player, even though PJ Tucker's not like 6'9", but still. They have a long career because if you fit into that role, shoot, play defense, and whatever it may be, you could put yourself in a good situation for a long career in the NBA.
Yeah, but is it just a long career that you're hoping for from a number 2 pick? You're expecting somebody that's going to be a perennial all-star. Do you think this kid is going to be that?
Well, it's always hard to say when it comes to these NBA draft players. But he's in a situation with LaMelo Ball, who's arguably one of the best playmakers in the NBA right now. If he stays on the court,
right.
That's one thing. But I think they're a young team. Despite all the legal trouble and whatnot, they will try and do their best. And I think we will see with him. I can't say he's going to be an all-star, but I can say if he trains the right way, if he puts himself in the right situations with the teams he plays for, and trains the right game plan for himself, finds his role, he will have a long career.
Do you think they made the right pick? Should they have selected Scoot instead of Miller?
No, because the difference between the Blazers and the Hornets is the Hornets are relying on LaMelo to be there long term. He's young still, right? He's already been an all-star.
Right.
As I said before, he can't stay on the court because he gets injured quite easily, but I feel like there's still a lot of time left to rely on him. Mm-hmm. Whereas Dame's 33, as you said before.
Right.
You could part ways with him now and not feel too bad about it because you couldn't do anything with him in this time being. But LaMelo, you still have some time to see how he really turns out, and you don't want to put 2 young point guards together because then it's like they're fighting for their spot on the team. Whereas Scoot with the Blazers, you could give up Damian Lillard. Mm-hmm. Not like he's a bad player or anything, obviously not, but like you can do it now because look where we are and we haven't done anything with his talent.
So Damian Lillard did not get traded, although there was a lot of speculation regarding that. We did have one big trade.
Well, we've had multiple big trades in the past few days. The main 3, the big 3 would be Bradley Beal to the Suns.
Right.
Kristaps trade to the Celtics, which also involved Marcus Smart. Mm-hmm. And then you have the Jordan Poole for Chris Paul trade. So let's start with the big one.
Right.
Bradley Beal to the Suns.
But to me, so that deal did not make all that much sense to me. I understand they're trying to create another big 3.
Well, because Kevin Durant's a little too scared to play without all-star, high-level all-star caliber players.
Yeah. And to me, the Suns, they were the only team during the Western Conference playoffs this year that actually, they were tied after 4 games, 2-2 against the Denver Nuggets, the eventual champions. The difference between the Nuggets and the Suns, it turned out, or at least in my opinion, turned out to be, the depth or lack thereof, as it, for the Suns. So, to me, I mean, they got rid of even more of their depth.
And you want to know, the crazy part about that is that's the same problem I feel like the Nets had.
Yeah.
When Kevin Durant blew that team up on the Nets to get James Harden and Kyrie Irving, now you're blowing up the Suns team. You have no one to back you guys up. And giving away Chris Paul, too, I feel like something that we see a lot, and this will tie into the next Porzingis trade as well, for me at least, is that you need a point guard.
Yeah.
You have no point guard now. Devin Booker is a great player, but is he a great playmaker? No. Bradley Beal, I mean, he's a once in a blue moon 50-point scorer.
Right.
I don't know.
He's a scorer.
He's a scorer. You don't have somebody. What are you going to trust Cameron Payne to be your leading point guard?
Right. And then it's not as if they needed scoring. You have Durant and Booker already.
Yeah, who are probably again, top 5 scorers in the league.
It's just a redundancy. Mm-hmm. And to me, it doesn't necessarily improve the team. I think they got less formidable by making.
I think so too, because they're just going to step on each other's toes.
Yeah,
that's all it's going to be. They're both going to. All three of them are going to want to score. You know, we saw Devin Booker and Kevin Durant work pretty well. Right. As you said, they tied with the Nuggets, the eventual champions. But I don't know. I think it's going to be another Brooklyn Nets situation. Kevin Durant comes in, blows up the team. There's no bench depth now.
I think that's a good comparison.
Yep.
You know, the Brooklyn
they did
scenario,
the same exact thing.
which did not work out.
Yep.
Apparently, they weren't watching in Phoenix, so they decided to do exactly the same thing that Brooklyn did.
Enough on them. Now to the Celtics, which I think is kind of a crazy trade to me.
So, you know, if I was a Boston Celtic fan, I would have liked the original version of the trade.
Oh, obviously.
I mean, to me, having to trade Marcus Smart in that, like, Marcus Smart gave the Celtics a little bit of an edge. Yep. And I think they're going to find not having him around is going to change their team dynamic. I understand I think I understand, you know, their desire to have Porzingis. You know, obviously a 7-footer with range could help out defensively, block some shots. It frees up, you know, Brown and Tatum to do their thing. You know, Porzingis is just going to be a third option. It would be a great third option on any team. So I understand their motivation, but I don't know, you know, getting rid of or including Smart or using Smart as the focal point of the trade. I think they're going to find that to be something difficult to overcome when the season starts next year.
Right, and now they have no one really to fill that role. Are you going to put Derek White with his big-ass forehead on the court? Like, he did well in the playoffs, but it's just not the same as having Marcus Smart, you know? And then you have Jaylen Brown, who proved to be horrible at putting the ball on the floor in the playoffs.
Right.
Who had, like, more turnovers than made shot attempts in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals.
Right.
And you're, once again, as I mentioned in the previous trade, you don't have your point guard.
Right.
That's the person who's going to make everything happen for your team, whether they're the best player on the floor or not.
Right.
Which Marcus Smart wasn't the best player on the floor, but he was the heart. He made things happen. If stuff got a little bit, you know, dangerous, they get started into dangerous territories, he came in and he slowed it all down and made things work.
No, it's sort of like he was, you know, the Celtics version of Draymond Green.
Right.
Almost.
Yeah.
You know.
But, you know, on the topic of Marcus Smart, what do you think this means for the Grizzlies now? They have the last two defensive players of the year on their team now, Jaren Jackson Jr. and Marcus Smart. Does that change the mentality?
Well, certainly it improves their team.
Right.
I mean, and I think they have some young talent that would benefit from playing with somebody like Marcus Smart, who has a lot of experience.
Yeah.
Not an NBA champion, but certainly with a lot of experience, playoff experience. So
he's made it to the finals.
Yep.
And he's a tough guy too. He could definitely put John Morant in his place.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
And he could still play that 2-guard spot too.
Yep.
On that in that starting lineup. So I think he's a good fit. And on the top, quickly touching on John Morant, he's going to be out for 25 games, and I think he will fill that role pretty well. Not to the John Morant level, as talented as he is, but still he could hold him down for a little bit until John Morant comes back and plays for them.
Hopefully he learns his lesson and he straightens his life and career.
It took him a couple tries, you know, pulling a gun out on Instagram Live 2 times, but and then briefly touching on this Chris Paul Jordan Poole trade. What do you think it does for both teams?
Well, Jordan Poole trade, to me, that's sort of a salary dump on Warriors side.
Right.
They're trying to re-sign Draymond, get Clay back. I understand their thinking. There was some conflict during the playoffs between Poole and Draymond, but you know,
we saw the conflict.
Yeah.
Before the playoffs.
Yeah, and so. You know, hard to give away a 24-year-old player with some talent, and but I think considering they want to keep the nucleus together that that was their championship formula. I understand why they did what they did, but bringing Chris Paul on board, I'm not 100% sure what that does.
I don't think it does much except for waste money. Chris Paul's clearly on his way out. As good as he still is for a team, I don't know. You already have Steph Curry. Maybe he can make the bench a little bit better. You have a young bench on the Warriors team, but other than that, I feel like trade is not doing too much for either side. I feel like the Jordan Poole maybe has a little bit more upside right now in his career than Chris Paul.
Right.
He could probably do a little bit more for your team than Chris Paul. What is he, like 38 now?
Yeah.
56? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So who's older?
Right.
Should we touch upon free agency in the NBA that's coming up July 1?
Well, free agency, we're looking at what's his name? Kyrie Irving. He's the number one the number one guy out there, free agent
out there. I would assume that Dallas is going to re-sign him. I mean, obviously he's going to go after the most money, which seems to be his motivation throughout, or at least the last few years.
Mm-hmm. He's already got his ring.
Right. And, the only team that really could offer him what he wants is the Mavericks. So I would assume that he would stay.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I'm pretty sure James Harden is also a free agent.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen with that. Like going back to Lillard, if there's sort of a sign and trade that they could do, sign Harden, trade him to Portland for Lillard. I don't know if that's anything that Portland would be interested in. I think if I was running the Trailblazers, I wouldn't be interested in it. But, if somehow the Sixers could get Lillard to play with Embiid, that would be a formidable combination.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, free agency, it is what it is. There'll be a few surprises, but I feel like those are the two.
To me, but also, like, an interesting free agent for me is, what's that guy? The center for the Bucks.
Brook Lopez,
I would assume will re-sign with the Bucks.
Mm-hmm.
But I was reading something the other day about him possibly signing with the Kings and becoming the center there and moving, Sabonis as more of a power forward. And then to me, Lopez is sort of, a poor man's Jokic. Like, to me, he's sort of a bridge between past centers and what Jokic is today.
Lopez or Sabonis?
No, Lopez even more. In that big guy, could shoot some from three-point range, decent passer, is not as mobile as Jokic, obviously.
Yeah.
But he's certainly not, a low block center, which was, the formula for any center or the standard for any center in the NBA in the past was somebody that sets themselves up in the low block, takes passes in from the guard, and shoots over the center. I mean, now he sort of was a little bit different. Played on the low post too, but he was able to take his game outside beyond the three-point line, shoot some threes every once in a while, was able to move the ball efficiently, good eye. I mean, Sabonis is a shorter version of him. Jokic is the one now that's sort of perfected that, and I think that's what every team is going to look for. I think that is the new prototype center for the NBA. I think Wembanyama, although I think he wants to play power forward, he's sort of that mold. There's another guy, he could move, he could pass, he could shoot from the outside, and he could take those little fall-away jumpers, from the low post if he needed to. He's got a little jump hook, all that. So he's got a full array of game. Sort of, could be a taller Jokic even, So really interesting. I think if Brook Lopez were to change teams, if he ended up on the Kings, I think it would, make the Kings an interesting team to watch in the West.
Well, they were definitely a fun team to watch this previous playoffs. They worked the Warriors, former champions. So I think they have a bright future ahead of them. I don't think that trading away, remember Tyrese Halliburton to the Pacers for Sabonis, hurt them that much. I think that they're going to be a fun team, and I think not a finals appearance, but I think they'll be fun to watch in the playoffs for the coming years. And I feel like that's enough on basketball for now.
What should we talk about next?
Well, briefly, we could hit some golf.
Well, we had the U.S. Open last week.
Right.
Los Angeles Country Club was really rooting for Ricky Fowler to win his first, and sort of choked away the final round. Wyndham Clark won. I don't think anybody really cares other than his family and loved ones. But good for Wyndham Clark. This week, the LPGA, they're at Baltusrol Country Club here in New Jersey, playing the PGA Championship, Women's PGA Championship. This may be the first time in history where the venue is more famous than any of the athletes that are competing. So hopefully, I'm sure somebody's going to win.
Yep.
I don't know that many people are going to care, but they're playing at Baltusrol, historical, legendary club in Jersey.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Baseball?
Baseball.
We're halfway through.
Yeah.
What is happening in baseball?
Right now, baseball, from what I've been watching, obviously you're the more knowledgeable baseball mind here, but we're seeing a lot of the teams you don't expect to be good play well right now.
Yeah.
The Reds. The
are
Orioles
well.
obviously have all of their prospects coming up this year and playing to their standards. And,
Well, we'll see what happens with the Reds.
even the Angels are in a wild card spot right now.
And the Angels are trying really, really hard to do well this year.
Yeah.
In the effort to keep Ohtani on the team. I think Ohtani, if he had a choice, I think he wants to at least stay on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Certainly closer to get home to Japan from the West Coast than it is the East Coast. I think he wants to win with the Angels. He's got so much time and effort invested there. I think obviously the Angels want to keep him. I mean, they made the trade yesterday for what's his face?
Eduardo Escobar.
Escobar from the Mets. Since Rendon got hurt, they needed somebody.
Rendon and Gio Urshela,
Yeah.
who I think played a lot of the infield positions for them throughout the season.
I mean, they need a lot more help
On the
than
pitching.
Escobar, and they need they need a bullpen. Gee whiz.
It's
they throw
very
away,
rough to see.
They throw away games that Ohtani
even last night
pitches.
to the Rockies. Ohtani didn't pitch, but him and Trout went back-to-back homers. They're up 4-2, and then the bullpen comes in, I guess, for whoever was starting last night. I wasn't really watching the game, but they give up this 4-2 lead towards the end of the game, and they lose 7-4 to the Rockies, who just aren't a good team.
Right. So, I mean, as far as New York baseball is concerned, both New York teams a little bit disappointing this year, more so the Mets than the Yankees. But for some reason, the Mets are now 14 games out behind the Atlanta Braves, who are playing decent, not great, I don't think.
Recently World Series champions, so obviously up to their standards.
Yep. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just a little bit biased. I'm a Met fan, so but I just don't feel like we've seen the best of this team yet. I think they are better than they played, and I think they are going to put it together. I'm hoping that by the All-Star break they could get the lead down into single digits, and I think they'll be okay. It just seems like they haven't been able to put games where they hit together with the games where they pitch well.
Yeah.
They get out-hit on games where they hit, and they get out-pitched in games that they actually pitch well. So I think things usually balance out in a long season, especially like a baseball season, 162 games. So we'll see what happens.
we'll definitely see what happens. And I mean, the Yankees, if we're talking about New York sports, Aaron Judge is kind of being a little bit of a, P word.
Well,
His toe hurts.
Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton, they're big, strong guys seemingly, and they're the two most fragile.
They're crybabies.
Yeah, two most fragile players in Major League Baseball.
And I mean, Stanton came back recently, and he hasn't done anything.
Right.
Like he's people are like, what the hell's going on with him?
Yeah.
And their prospect Volpe certainly not what they expected. So bad time for New York baseball.
Yep. But both teams. I mean, certainly both teams have deep pockets if they needed to try to, spend more money to become more competitive. Each team could do that. I don't know how much more the Mets are going to invest, since they're the highest payroll ever at $350 million. I don't know how much more their owner is willing to invest in the team, but we shall see.
Well, when it comes to spending money, when it comes to upgrading a team, the league, the baseball, the big guy is Shohei Ohtani, upcoming free agent, as we talked about briefly before. He wants to win, and as upsetting as maybe the Mets have been playing so far, they do have the talent to win. There's talk about Shohei potentially going to the Mets, even though you said he wants to stay on the West Coast. Like, obviously Shohei is the best player in baseball. I don't think it's debatable unless you're a delusional Yankees fan, but it's not debatable. So, do you see the Mets going for him?
Well, I think every team that has deep pocket, the Dodgers are going to go after him.
Right.
The Mets, the Yankees, probably even the Atlanta Braves will go after him. But I don't know Ohtani very well. Obviously, I don't know him personally, but from what I read and from what I see as a fan, he doesn't seem somebody that's necessarily motivated 100% by the money.
Right.
I think loyalty is also important to him.
Mm-hmm.
And like I mentioned earlier, I think West Coast is his preferred coast. So we shall see. But the Angels will not trade him at the trade deadline.
Oh, there's no point.
Yeah,
they're playing the best they've played since they've had him.
Yeah.
Right now.
They will not trade him.
And he's obviously putting up another MVP season.
Yep.
And I feel like he'll continue to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But he's playing out of his mind right now, leading the league in home runs. He's done it before. Right. Leading in RBIs too, I'm pretty sure. Or he might be tied with Adolis Garcia right now, but still, I mean, he's the leader alongside him.
And I think he's top 2 or 3 in strikeouts as a pitcher
too. He's top. He's at least top 5. I know that for sure.
Yep. So.
But I feel like
great player.
Yeah, he hit a home run last night on a ball super inside too, which was kind of a funny thing to watch. But let's take predictions right now. Who do we see, making noise in the MLB playoffs, which is only half a season away?
We're only halfway through the season.
Do you have any locks?
Locks. I don't know that there are any locks yet. I don't know that anybody is playing well. The team that's played consistently well since the beginning of the year is the Tampa Bay Rays.
Right, Randy Rose.
I think if there is one lock right now, I think it's a lock that the Rays will make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Right. Then who else do we have?
Texas Rangers.
I'm a little bit surprised at how good they've been this year. They signed DeGrom during the offseason.
And he went back to his usual self, sitting on the bench.
So his hurt again, and despite they were hoping that he would be their ace. They lose their ace, but they're winning. So I think it still remains to be seen. I think they're almost playing over their heads. Mm-hmm. But then again, Texas Rangers is not a team that I watch all that often, so you could take that with a grain of salt. But I just my feeling, I think they're playing over their heads. I don't know that they're necessarily a lock to be in the playoffs this year. Obviously, Houston Astros are going to have something to say about that division too. So I think there's still too much time to really talk about MLB playoffs.
Right. There's a lot of games in an MLB season. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who's going to get injured. You know what trades are going to be made. We're not even at the trade deadline yet,
That's right?
And I remember last year. Last year was a big trade deadline. Mm-hmm. Remember Juan Soto going to the Padres, who haven't really done anything with any of the talent they have on that team.
Right.
But yeah, like there's a lot that could still happen. There's a lot of teams that could be blown up. A lot of teams that could get stacked before that playoffs.
There's even speculation that they'll blow up the Mets since they've been such a $350 million disappointment. But I don't think that will be the case.
If anything, they should give up one of those pitchers that they have.
Well, maybe. I almost feel like they'll take on more salary. Like money that other teams that may not want to pay anymore for, especially pitchers. I almost feel like they'd be willing to take on some bad contracts that maybe have a year or two on it in the hopes that one of these pitchers will perform.
Well, they did get 2 prospects from the Angels for Eduardo Escobar.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things that the Mets want to do, right? They want, part of the issue with the Mets was that, they had some prospects in the minor leagues, but they were mostly everyday players. So Beatty came up early this year. We've seen Alvarez now. Vientos came up for a short time. You got Vientos' big problem is he doesn't really have a position to play. I don't think he's got much defensive ability. He's a DH, if anything.
You don't need a DH on the Mets, in my opinion. Well, kinda. Yeah. Even though Vogelback's been swinging it pretty well recently.
Yeah, but I don't think they'll blow up that team. I think they're willing to. I think the ownership is willing to take on even more money if it means winning and getting into the playoffs again.
Right. So let's hit a few quick topics right now.
Okay.
I'm not the biggest hockey guy, but you have something quick to say about them, correct?
Well, we had the Stanley Cup Finals just ended a couple of weeks ago. Vegas Golden Knights won. I guess other than in Vegas, I don't think anybody really cares.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what happens in the NHL next year. Hopefully the Rangers do better.
Right. In my little talk on hockey right now is I don't follow any hockey. I don't follow the NHL on Instagram or anything like that. But I'm going to ask you, guess which sports account on Instagram informed me of the results of that playoff series. You're familiar with this team. That's the only thing I'll give you.
So
it's an Instagram account.
Instagram account belonging to another professional team.
Yeah.
Is the one that informed you that the Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup?
They informed me the results of the Stanley Cup.
Oh, okay. And it probably was not. The reason why you're asking is because it's not like an NHL franchise.
No.
Yeah. So, I don't know, the Knicks.
No, the Miami Dolphins.
Really?
Yeah.
It sort of makes sense because it was the Panthers that lost.
Right. And Mike McDaniel, the coach, went to every game, home game. So it's kind of.
Well, Tua was there too.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't follow any hockey accounts, as I said, but I do follow like Bleacher Report, House of Highlights, who post every sport.
Right.
But I didn't hear anything about it, so I guess it just didn't really matter to anybody. But yeah. So the last segment of the show, I feel like we're ready for that. Is our question of the day, and we like to just ask a question that we're curious about for each other, and that will be, what if?
What if?
Who is the biggest what if, in your opinion, in sports? You could go first.
So, what if is always an interesting question as it relates to sports, right? Because there are things that happen in sports, and maybe people don't have as long a career, or that you expected, and you wonder what if he or she had the career that we all expected, or at least the length of the career that we all expected them to have. But mine's a little bit different. It's associated with baseball. Specifically 1967 amateur draft. The New York Mets had the number 1 pick that year. The Kansas City Athletics, who ultimately became the Oakland A's, who I think maybe soon will become the Las Vegas Athletics. Anyway, they had the number 2 pick.
Right.
The Mets decided to pick Steve Chilcott, who was a catcher out of a California high school. But the number 1 player in the country that year was drafted number 2 by the A's. His name was Reggie Jackson.
Right.
So there's a lot of speculation and rumors about why the Mets didn't draft Reggie Jackson that year. And this is all speculation and rumors, so I'm not going to get into any of that. But my thing is, what if the Mets had selected Reggie Jackson?
Okay.
And Reggie Jackson, instead of playing for the Oakland A's, played for the Mets. And so one of the things that I checked up is, 67, Jackson gets drafted number 2. It's a year or so later that he finally comes up to the major leagues. So I was wondering whether if he was on the team, it would, obviously when the Mets won the World Series in '69, they were a team built around their pitching with Seaver and Koosman, McGraw, Nolan Ryan. So I was wondering whether, if the Mets happened to be a better team, whether that would have impacted their ability to obtain the pitchers that they did have on the '69 team, and eventually the '73 team that lost to the Oakland A's and Reggie Jackson. But I realized in doing some investigation that the Mets could have still had Ryan, Seaver, Koosman, McGraw, all these guys, because they were all involved in the drafts or were selected before 1967. Mm-hmm. So they would have all been on the same team. So what if Reggie Jackson was on the Mets? Reggie Jackson played on the Oakland A's team that won the World Series in 72, 73, 74, 3 consecutive years. The Mets had won the World Series without Reggie Jackson in 1969. So it is conceivable that if Jackson played for the Mets, certainly Jackson would have been the best offensive player on any of those late 60s, early 70s Mets teams. I think there is an argument that could be made that if he played on those late 60s, early 70s teams, the Mets could have won, 4 or 5 World Series in a short period of time, a short span. Sort of a fun thing to speculate about. Sort of disappointing to know that the Mets didn't have the wherewithal to select the right player in '67, but that was my what if topic.
Right, and what if is a fun question to ask in sports. I mean, my what if is Bo Jackson.
Bo Jackson,
who played both professional football and baseball, mm-hmm. which I don't think we've ever seen that actively be done before, or even now. Mm-hmm. He played.
We saw Dion. We saw Dion try to do it.
Did you at the same time?
Yep, He was right after Bo Jackson.
Yeah, but he wasn't as good at baseball as Bo Jackson.
No, he was definitely a football player.
Yeah,
Dion was definitely a football player. Bo Jackson was an all-star in both sports.
Right, but yeah, he played for the Raiders and the Royals, right?
Raiders and the Royals. Yep.
And but his whole thing is he kind of got shut down by injury.
Right. So I could remember the game where he injured himself.
It was a hamstring.
Actually, he sort of dislocated his hip, and he dislocated his hip. He had broken a run down the sidelines, and there was one guy to beat, and the one guy grabbed his right leg, mm-hmm. and a lot of this too is more speculation than anything. They talk about if he was a normal human being. When they grabbed his leg, he would have just fallen.
Yep.
But because he was such an athletic specimen, he pulled so hard on his leg that's what dislocated, his hip. Mm-hmm. And I remember, the Raiders won that game. I think it was a game against the Cleveland Browns, if I'm not mistaken. He was walking off the field. He definitely had a limp. He was walking with a limp, but nobody ever thought that was a major injury.
Right.
But he ultimately had to have hip replacement surgery. He was never able to get back on the football field. He continued with his baseball career. Still a tremendous athletic specimen, but certainly not. He lost some of his athletic ability.
Right.
It's a great what if topic.
Right, and the reason, especially for me, as to why it's such a what if for me is people ask the question all the time.
Right.
Who's the greatest athlete of all time?
Right.
And people now say Shohei Ohtani. Pitches and he hits. Michael Jordan, the best basketball player of all time. And the list goes on, but I feel like...
Well, Michael Jordan tried baseball too, but he wasn't,
true. But I feel like if he stayed the way he was and he didn't injure himself or get ridden by injuries, there would be no debate.
No, there
would be no debate, and it'd be an undebatable question. So, with somebody whose talent could have answered that question undoubtedly, losing the ability to answer that question so easily by saying his name, that's such a big what if to me.
Yeah. Well, it's also what if he never injured himself, is Michael Jordan as big as he is within the Nike sphere of business? Because Bo Jackson was also one of the top names within the Nike family selling. They created the cross trainer sneaker because of Bo Jackson. Cross training became a new sports phrase that they use because of the fact that he played two sports. So if Bo Jackson never gets hurt, does like the Bo Jackson sneaker line within Nike, would that have been as big or bigger than the Michael Jordan, Air Jordan line?
Right.
So there's a lot of what if that you could discuss
about Bo Jackson,
because that's how great he was.
Right. Any other thoughts from you?
No, I think we covered a lot today on our first episode.
Basketball, baseball, and what if.
Yeah.
And even the sports that nobody cares about.
Exactly. So this is sort of the format that we're going to have on our show going forward. Right. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And we'll try to put one of these episodes together once a week.
Once a week, we're going to hit with the fresh, the big word here, Shinsen, fresh topics of sports. Every week, we're going to keep it fresh, and that's how we roll here.
Okay, so thanks for joining us, and hopefully you'll join us for the next episode.
See you.
This is Fred.
This is Trey.
And we'll see you in the next one.